Lena Brooks didn't believe in fate, but the night she walked into the Velvet Room and sat alone at the bar, she felt something shift, like her life had been quietly waiting for this exact moment. The jazz club buzzed with soft saxophone notes and clinking glasses, a golden haze floating just above the red velvet booths. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not tonight. Her roommate had bailed on their girls' night last minute, and Lena had decided to go anyway. She told herself it was just to get out of her apartment, to stop thinking about how badly she needed a new job, or how much rent was due, or how she'd spent the last 2 years putting her dreams on hold. But deep down, she was starving for something that didn't feel like survival. She tucked her curls behind her ear and sipped her cranberry soda, eyes on the small jazz trio near the stage. Her thrifted black dress was a little too tight, her heels a little too worn. Still, she sat tall, pretending she belonged, even as the couples around her laughed and leaned close. From across the room, a man watched her. He wasn't the type to frequent jazz clubs on a whim. But tonight, Yaron Jameson, billionaire CEO of JX Capital and the man usually swarmed by publicists and board meetings, had quietly slipped away from a dinner party uptown and ended up here. He was tired of being seen. Tired of the fake laughs and empty flattery. He just wanted normal for once. Real. So when he saw her alone, calm, quietly stunning in a way that didn't beg for attention, he couldn't look away. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his deep voice smooth as the music behind him. Lena blinked. The man standing beside her was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple black button-up, sleeves rolled up to his forearms. No tie. No entourage. Just piercing dark eyes and a presence that felt expensive. "No," she said, gesturing to the empty stool. "But I'm warning you, I'm not great company tonight." He smiled, not the rehearsed kind, but warm and unfiltered. "Lucky for me, I'm not looking for great company. Just honest." He slid onto the stool beside her. "I'm your own." "Lena," she replied. "You come to strange places and sit next to strangers often?" "Only when they look like they're pretending not to be lonely." She laughed, caught off guard. "Is that right?" He shrugged. "I could be wrong. But I'm not." The conversation flowed like they'd known each other in another life. They talked about music, books, the worst dates they'd ever been on. Lena didn't ask what he did for a living, and he didn't volunteer it. She liked that. For once, she wasn't being calculated or charming or performative. She was just Lena, and he liked her that way. "Want to dance?" he asked as the band shifted to a bluesy slow number. Lena hesitated. "I'm not really a..." He stood, extended a hand. "Just one." She took it. His palm was warm, his touch firm but gentle as he led her to a small space in front of the stage. They swayed slowly, the music curling around them like smoke. She rested her cheek lightly against his chest, her heart beating too fast. "Your trouble," she whispered. "Why's that?" "Because I could get used to this." Yaron didn't answer. He just held her closer. They danced until the band packed their instruments. Afterward, he walked her outside where the city air had cooled and smelled like rain. "Let me call you a car," he offered. She shook her head. "I take the subway." He glanced at the sky. "Storm's coming. I've survived worse." He hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out a sleek black umbrella. "At least take this." Lena eyed it. "That's a ridiculous umbrella." "It's just an umbrella." "No, it looks like it costs more than my rent." He grinned. "Then it's a bargain." She laughed again, then took it. "Thanks." "Yaron." He watched her disappear down the stairs to the station, umbrella in hand, dress fluttering behind her. And she didn't even know. She didn't know the man she just slow danced with in a jazz club was worth over $20 billion. She didn't know he owned half the buildings on the block she just walked past. And she didn't know he was already thinking about her smile like it was something rare he'd found on accident. Yaron returned to his penthouse that night with her name echoing in his head. Lena. She had no idea, and that made him want her even more. Lena didn't expect to see him again. That kind of connection, the kind that slipped through cracks in reality and made time bend. It wasn't supposed to last longer than a night. But 3 days later, she stepped into the lobby of the Lexington Arts Center. Her resume folded twice in the pocket of her coat, and froze. There he was, not in a booth, not with low lighting and jazz in the background, but in daylight, standing beside a woman in a crisp navy suit, listening intently as she gestured toward a series of framed black and white photographs. He looked different here, sharper. Like the shadows from the club had softened him, and now she was seeing the real version. Clean lines, deliberate posture, watch glinting beneath the cuff of his sleeve. He didn't see her at first. Lena considered turning around. She hadn't come here for him. She'd come for the assistant curator position, part-time, low pay, but tied to art, and that was enough. She'd heard there was an open call for applicants to drop off resumes. She hadn't expected a gallery full of people or a man who made her heartbeat behave like it hadn't been fed in days. Before she could retreat, a voice called out behind her. "You're here for the submissions?" Lena turned toward a woman with a clipboard and a tight bun. "Yes, I brought my resume." "Great. We're collecting them in the back conference room. Down the hall, second door on the right." Lena nodded and moved quickly, hoping she wouldn't have to walk past him. "Lena," she stopped. Yaron's voice was unmistakable. She turned slowly and found him already closing the distance. Hands at his sides, face unreadable but his eyes. They held something that made her forget where she was. "You work here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "No," he said. "I'm one of the sponsors." That made her stomach twist slightly. "Oh, I didn't know you were in the art world." "I'm trying to be," she said. "This is more of a shot in the dark than a career move, but I figured I'd take a chance." He hesitated. "I didn't think I'd see you again." "Neither did I," she replied. "But here we are." He looked like he wanted to say more, but the woman in the navy suit called his name, reminding him gently that the gallery walkthrough was still in progress. "I'll be right there," he said, without taking his eyes off Lena. She stepped back. "I should drop this off." "Wait, are you free tonight?" She frowned. "Are you asking me out?" "I'm asking if you'd like to come to dinner. Somewhere." "Not here." She hesitated. "I don't usually say yes to men I barely know." "You danced with me. That was different." He smiled, not the same way as before, but with a quiet confidence that didn't push. "It doesn't have to be a date. Just dinner. Conversation. A continuation." She studied him. Something about the way he asked made it impossible to say no. He didn't lure. He invited. "Fine," she said. "But if it's someplace with a fixed menu, I'm leaving." That night, she stood in front of a sleek black car parked outside her building, holding her coat closed with one hand and wondering what she'd just agreed to. When the driver opened the door, the interior lights revealed a bottle of sparkling water already chilled in the console and flowers tucked into a side vase. "You must be Lena," the driver said warmly. "Mr. Jameson asked me to take you straight to the club." She blinked. "Wait, what club?" But the driver only gestured politely for her to climb in. When she arrived, the building didn't have a name on the front. Just a long row of antique lanterns lining a marble walkway and a velvet rope that parted the moment the driver pulled up. Inside, the scent of saffron and citrus floated through the air, and a hostess greeted her by name. "Right this way. Mr. Jameson is waiting." He stood beside a private table recessed into the wall, lit by a single overhead pendant. He wasn't wearing the same kind of clothes as before tonight. It was a tailored charcoal jacket and a crisp, open-collared shirt, but it wasn't the outfit that struck her. It was how he looked when he saw her. Like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to walk in exactly like that. "You weren't kidding," she said, sliding into the booth. "This is definitely not a diner. I thought you deserved more than greasy fries." "I like greasy fries." "I'll remember that," he said. Dinner arrived in stages, each course more elaborate than the last. She didn't recognize half the ingredients, but he explained them with a knowledge that didn't feel rehearsed. He didn't make her feel small for not knowing. He made her feel like she belonged there, just by sitting across from him. Over dessert, she leaned back and crossed her arms. "All right, what's your story?" He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "You know mine. I'm broke, mildly chaotic, and have no idea where I'll be in 6 months. But you You're a mystery. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I run a company. Doing what? Investments. Real estate. A few tech projects. She narrowed her eyes. That's vague. It's complicated. Complicated sounds like code for very rich and very private. He didn't confirm or deny it. So what made you come to that jazz club? She asked. I needed noise that didn't come from a boardroom. She nodded slowly. And what did you find instead? He met her eyes. You. She stared at him, caught between disbelief and something warmer. You're serious. I don't waste time, he said quietly. I don't get a lot of it. She swallowed hard. What are you expecting from this? I don't know yet. But I know I want more of it. Lena felt the floor shift under her feet, even while sitting down. She was used to men who made promises they couldn't keep, or who disappeared before the check arrived. But this man, this impossibly calm, maddeningly composed man, wasn't making promises. He was offering possibilities, and that, somehow, was even more dangerous. Lena stood at the edge of the rooftop, wind teasing her curls. The city stretched wide beneath her like a glittering sea of secrets. Just behind her, the quiet hum of conversation and clinking glasses filled the air. Yaron's private benefit gala for the Lexington Youth Arts Initiative. She'd been invited 3 days after their dinner, the formal envelope hand-delivered to her apartment by a courier in a charcoal vest. She hadn't said yes immediately, but the idea of seeing him again had followed her through every shift at the bookstore, every cup of instant ramen, every night she sat staring at her ceiling wondering if life was supposed to feel like waiting. And now she was here, wearing a gown she hadn't paid for, deep sapphire satin with a slit up the side, a dress box that had appeared at her door with no note, only her name written in precise ink. A matching clutch tucked beneath her arm. Her heels clicked softly on the stone floor as she turned back toward the glass doors. He was already watching her. Yaron stood near the bar, talking to a man in a gray tuxedo who instantly faded into the background the moment he saw Lena. He excused himself and crossed the room with the ease of someone who'd grown up commanding attention, but his eyes were focused. Intent. Not performative. You came, he said, stopping just short of touching her. You sent a dress. How could I not? I didn't want to assume. You didn't, but you did pick the right size. I asked your building manager. She blinked. You what? He owed me a favor. Lena laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. You bribed my landlord to get my dress size? Not bribed. Negotiated. That's worse. He smiled faintly, then offered his arm. Come meet some people. They're not as terrifying as they look. She hesitated, then slid her hand into the crook of his elbow. Lead the way. Inside, the crowd shimmered with couture and confidence. Art dealers, philanthropists, gallery owners. Names Lena had only seen in bylines or whispered about at school. Yaron introduced her with ease, never once labeling her, never diminishing her presence. She wasn't his date. She wasn't his companion. He simply said, "This is Lena," and somehow that was enough to quiet the room around her. She found herself in conversation with a sculptor from Florence, then a curator from Berlin. Wine appeared in her hand. The string quartet shifted to something modern and haunting. She didn't see Yaron for nearly 20 minutes, until a familiar voice spoke behind her. You're a natural. She turned, brows raised. You left me. I wanted to see what you'd do. I panicked and told a woman from Paris that I once glued macaroni to a canvas and called it commentary on capitalism. Yaron chuckled. She asked for your card. Lena rolled her eyes. This is not my world. He stepped closer. You're already in it. For tonight. No, he said quietly. Not just tonight. Her breath caught. The words felt deliberate, measured. Before she could respond, a man approached, older, silver-haired, with a familiar sharpness in his gaze. Yaron's expression shifted by degrees. Mr. Jameson, the man said. I see you've brought someone new. Lena Brooks, Yaron replied. She's an artist. Lena extended her hand. The man shook it briefly, then turned back to Yaron. We need to discuss the Helsinki acquisition. Not tonight. It's time sensitive. So is this moment, Yaron said evenly, eyes never leaving Lena's. The man stiffened. You're making decisions with your heart again. I've made billions doing exactly that. He walked away without another word. Lena stared after him, then back at Yaron. That was my CFO, he said, and occasionally a pain in my ass. She crossed her arms. You really are loaded, aren't you? I don't think there's a polite way to answer that. I thought you were being mysterious because you had, like, a dark past or a secret family. Not because you're one of the wealthiest men in the country. He looked at her, serious now. Does it change anything? I don't know, she admitted. It's a lot. I wanted you to meet me before you met my world. You could have just told me. I didn't want it to be the first thing you saw. She stepped back, letting the space between them breathe. I need a second. He nodded. Take all the time you need. She walked past the bar, down a hallway lined with black and white portraits until she reached a side balcony. The silence was immediate. The air cooler. She leaned against the railing and let her thoughts unfurl. He hadn't lied. But he hadn't told the truth either. And now she was standing on a rooftop owned by a billionaire who danced with her like it meant something, then bought her a dress and handed her a glimpse into a life so far from her own it felt like fiction. She didn't hear him approach. I didn't bring you here to impress you, he said softly. I brought you because I wanted you to see what matters to me. She turned slowly. And what exactly is that? People who don't pretend. Lena studied him. There was something raw in his voice. Unpolished. Why me, she asked. You could have anyone in this room. I don't want anyone in this room. She looked away, fighting the instinct to run. Not from him, but from everything he represented, a life filled with expectations, public attention, power dynamics she wasn't sure she'd ever be comfortable with. I don't want to be someone you collect, she said. You're not a painting, he replied. You're the only thing I've seen lately that made me stop moving. That silenced her. I know what it looks like, he continued. The money, the events, the suits. But none of it means anything if I'm walking through it alone. Lena touched the railing, grounding herself. I'm not a project. I would never treat you like one. I need to be sure. Then let me prove it. She met his eyes and saw no calculation. Just a man offering something fragile beneath all the polish. Okay, she whispered. Then start here. He stepped forward. Tell me what you need. Honesty. No more edited versions. Deal. And space. I need to decide what I want without you trying to make the decision for me. I can give you that. She exhaled slowly, heart pounding. Then maybe we can keep walking. He reached for her hand, not to pull her in, just to hold it. Wherever you want to go, he said. I'm not in a hurry. For the first time that night, she smiled. Not because everything made sense, but because, for the first time in a long time, it didn't have to. Lena stepped through the sliding glass doors of the gallery's new West Wing, her heels quiet against the polished floors, the scent of fresh paint still faint in the air. Light poured in from the skylights above, catching the edges of the framed canvases and gilded fixtures. What had once been a dusty, underutilized storage space was now a minimalist exhibition hall, clean, serene, and undeniably hers. She couldn't stop staring. Not at the artwork, though it was hers too, but at the small brass plaque mounted beside the entrance. Brooks Wing. A space for emerging voices. She blinked hard and took a breath. Behind her, Yaron's voice was low but steady. You don't have to say anything. Just feel it. She turned to face him. You named it after me. No one else deserved it. Her brows lifted. You didn't ask. I didn't have to. Lena glanced back at the entrance, then down at her hands. Why me? Yaron's gaze didn't waver. Because you saw me before you knew what I could offer. And you let me see you before you knew what you were worth. She looked away, overwhelmed. This isn't a gesture. It's a legacy. Good, he said. Then it's finally something that matches what I feel. She moved to one of the long white benches in the center of the room and sat, the silence around them soft and reverent. I used to imagine what it would feel like to have space, not just physically, but space to grow, to fail, to try again. And now? He asked. She looked up at him. Now I'm terrified. Yaron crouched in front of her, his jacket stretching across his shoulders, his hands resting on her knees. I've faced board votes, market crashes, international lawsuits. But the idea of losing you? That's the only thing that's ever made my hands shake. She was quiet for a beat, then said, I still have questions. Ask them. She inhaled slowly. What happens when this stops being exciting for you? When I stop being new and become just another responsibility? Then I'll be grateful, he said. Because something real doesn't need to be new. It just needs to be chosen every day. And what if I fail? You will. And I'll be standing right there when you do. Not to catch you because I know you won't need that, but to remind you to get up. She studied him, eyes narrowing just slightly. You really think I can do this? I already watched you do it. I just gave you keys. She touched the edge of the bench. I never imagined this version of my life. Neither did I, he admitted. They stayed there for a moment, the hush between them peaceful rather than uncertain. Then Lena stood, her shoulders squaring as she took in the room again. There's going to be a lot of press. I know. They're going to ask questions. About us. Then I'll answer them. Honestly, you're not afraid of what they'll say? I've been called worse things than a man in love. Her eyes softened, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself to smile, not out of politeness or gratitude, but from someplace deep and unguarded. He met her smile with one of his own, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I was going to wait until the opening night. But you've never liked waiting. She froze. Yaron. I'm not proposing a life you don't want. I'm asking for one we build from the ground up. No secrets. No performances. Just us. He opened the box. Inside, a ring nestled between folds of deep blue velvet. It wasn't showy. There were no oversized diamonds or elaborate flourishes. Just a single detailed band of platinum, etched with the tiniest, most intricate design of a skyline, their skyline. Lena touched her lips, breath-catching. You had that made. I had it imagined. You made it real. She didn't speak. Instead, she stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his neck, and whispered against his collar, yes. He held her tightly, not with relief, but with reverence. Later that evening, they stood on the rooftop of the gallery, the city stretching beyond them, the air crisp and full of possibility. The official opening was still weeks away, but the lights were already installed, casting a soft glow over the canvas-covered walls. Yaron looked out over the skyline and said, You know, the night I saw you at the Velvet Room, I almost left. I thought I didn't belong in places like that anymore. I thought I'd lost the part of me that believed in unplanned things. Lena leaned into him. And I thought I was invisible. He kissed the side of her head. You were luminous. I still don't understand how this happened. You sat alone in a jazz club, he said, and I fell in love before the second chorus. She turned to him, eyes shining. Then let's make sure we never miss a song again. And they didn't. The scent of citrus blossoms drifted through the air as soft guitar chords threaded through the breeze. Lena stood barefoot in the garden courtyard of a villa tucked into the cliffs of Ravello, sunlight dancing across the ivory stones beneath her feet. The sea spread endlessly behind her, cobalt and endless, while rows of white chairs arched in a crescent around the garden's edge. It was warm but not stifling, the kind of warmth that made silk dresses float and skin glow. A breeze lifted the sheer veil at the nape of her neck, and she lifted one hand to still it, heart fluttering in her chest not with fear, but with something achingly full. Are you ready? A soft voice came from behind her. Elise, one of the gallery's new junior curators, peeked through the archway, holding a small crystal fluted glass. She offered it to Lena, who took it with a grateful nod. I feel like I'm standing in a dream, Lena whispered. You are, Elise said. And you look like the woman who built it. Lena smiled faintly and turned toward the long mirror propped under the lemon trees. Her dress was simple, no sequins, no corset, no cathedral train. Just silk, cut to move like water, with delicate cap sleeves and a plunging back. The only jewelry she wore was a single, thin gold chain with a small pendant at her collarbone. Something Yaron had given her on the morning he proposed. There were no guests with titles or headlines today. Just people who mattered. Friends they collected slowly, intentionally. Artists. Mentors. The woman from Paris who'd asked for Lena's card was seated beside the sculptor from Florence. Even Lena's former roommate Maggie was here, now working as a full-time creative consultant for the Brooks wing. Everything had changed, but none of it had been fast. And none of it had taken her away from herself. A soft knock at the doorframe pulled her gaze. Yaron stood there, not in a tuxedo, but in a pale linen suit, collar open, sleeves rolled. He held out a hand before stepping inside. "I couldn't wait," he said, voice low. "You're not supposed to see me yet. I've waited long enough." She laughed, the sound catching in her throat. "You're going to ruin the magic." "No," he said. "I'm going to make sure I remember every second of it." She stepped toward him, glass forgotten on the table behind her, and slid her hand into his. He kissed her knuckles. "I had them hold the ceremony. Just for a few minutes." "Why?" "Because I needed to tell you something before we say the vows." She tilted her head. "Yaron, you're scaring me." He exhaled slowly. "I bought the building." "What building?" "The one with the velvet room." Her brows rose. "Why?" "Because that night changed everything for me. And I want to preserve it. I'm turning it into a free creative space. For artists who can't afford studio time. For musicians who need a mic. For dancers who just need a floor." Her lips parted, breath catching. "I don't want to just give away money," he continued. "I want to give away chances. Like the one you gave me." She stepped forward and placed her hand over his chest. "You have no idea what that means." "I do. That's why it felt important." She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his. "This was never about the money." "I know. That's how I knew it was real." They stood like that for a moment, letting the silence settle over them, letting the gravity of everything that had brought them here thread between their fingers. Then, as if on cue, the music down in the courtyard shifted. A soft, stripped-down version of a jazz standard, one they danced to once in a club neither of them had planned to visit. "You ready now?" he asked. "I was born ready." They walked down the stone steps together, hand in hand, no aisle between them, no dramatic pause. Just two people who had already chosen each other long before anyone asked them to prove it. The officiant smiled as they reached the arch of woven olive branches and silk ribbons. The waves crashed softly in the distance. And then, with no pomp, no performance, they exchanged vows that were handwritten, unpolished, and deeply them. "I don't promise perfection," Lena said, voice steady, "but I promise presence. I promise to challenge you, to soften you, to hold you accountable and protect your peace. I promise to keep showing up, even when it's hard. I promise to never treat your love like a possession," Yaron replied. "I promise to protect your fire, not dim it. To never forget how lucky I am that you saw me before I ever deserved you. I promise to be worthy of your faith." When it was done, they kissed not with ceremony, but with certainty. The kind of kiss that didn't ask for applause, only acknowledgement. The sun dipped lower behind them. Champagne was poured, and they danced barefoot on mosaic tiles to a live quartet as dusk painted the sky in blush and gold. And later, as the stars blinked into view and the lights from the villa glowed like fireflies, they sat on a low wall overlooking the sea, her head on his shoulder, his hand tracing lazy circles on her arm. "I never thought I'd love my life," Lena said softly. "You didn't just love it," Yaron replied. "You built it." She tilted her head to look up at him. "We built it." He leaned down and kissed her temple. "Forever starts easy when it begins with truth." They stayed there long after the music faded, long after the last guest retired to their rooms, letting the silence of contentment settle between them. In the months that followed, the Brooks wing opened to international acclaim, featuring work from young artists who had never stepped inside a gallery before. The Velvet Room, now a thriving non-profit creative space, held weekly showcases and open mic nights, with Lena occasionally slipping into the back to watch, a quiet smile on her lips. The press tried often to capture the couple's story, but it was never quite theirs to tell. They lived between two cities, two countries, and countless new beginnings, but always together. And every anniversary without fail, they returned to Ravello. Not for the villa, not for the view, but because the memory of that evening, the sea, the vows, the certainty was the only tradition either of them ever needed.